trying to think of the theme song. I can't think of it in my...
There's a theme song for Mad Max?
I feel like there is. At least for Fury Road, right? I don't know. Anyways. Hey, guys. Welcome back. It's your boys, the Hit Players, Sans Connor, who unfortunately couldn't join us this week. We recently just went to go watch a movie that will basically depict what will happen if we elect Donald Trump into office.
Or if we don't elect Donald Trump in office.
Or if we don't elect Donald... Yeah, basically post-November.
2025, basically, is what this movie is.
This is what is going to happen to us. Now, we just watched Furiosa. George Miller, the man...
Returning.
The madman himself is back. And I think we were both... Well, I was interested to see... is he doing a Ridley Scott, or is he doing a Martin Scorsese, where just these directors that are from the 70s and 80s, can they get one more in them?
Well, I think Ridley Scott is a more fair comparison because he did prequels to Alien with Prometheus. Yeah. And so this is George Miller going back and doing prequels for his own series as well. Series. Do you think he pulled it off?
We'll get to that first. I will stance on Fury Road.
Saying that you were interested in watching this is exactly how I felt. Yeah. I wasn't excited necessarily, mostly because I knew it was a prequel.
Yeah.
And
well, it's a prequel that somehow the only reason it was made was because Charlize Theron was going to be in it, and then they're like, "Wait, it's been 10 years."
Yeah. And
we can no longer realistically cast Charlize Theron because she's just at a completely different level in her career and also just older. So it's like my excitement was very, very low going into the theater. Also, it was like Furiosa's cool. Why do we need a whole backstory about this cool, like, I hate when people are like, let's make a story about that guy and it's the quiet character.
Really?
And you're like, I don't need that.
I don't hate that. I actually think it would have been worse if it was a Mad Max backstory. Which is not to say that the other older Mad Max movies are backstory. But, you know, he's his own character. Like, part of his character is that he almost doesn't have a past in a way. Whereas I think with Furiosa, I don't know, it makes more sense to point at her and say, like, we'll dive into her backstory. Because she has a prominent role in Fury Road without, you know, having a backstory in that film. Yeah. But this movie is purely a sequel. Like, it ends right where Fury Road begins, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
That's why I thought that this was like Rogue One in a way.
It's like, just you have to watch them back to back to get the full cinematic experience.
Yeah. And I like Fury Road. I think we've both said that.
I think it's our favorite. Well, it's definitely my favorite action movie of the 2010s in terms of just pure visceral rawness. In terms of like,
it was a strong return. Yeah. In a decade full of rehashes and reboots. I think Fury Road proved that you could actually
do it with class.
Do it with class in a way.
With substance.
So I was hesitantly interested because in a weird way it felt almost too much to do more. Yeah. Especially a prequel. I think a sequel I would have been excited for. But a prequel, definitely I was kind of like, I don't know so much. I think it was okay.
It was an interesting movie. It was interesting getting into it. Have you watched any of the other Mad Maxes?
I have not watched any of the other Mad Max's movies.
I've seen
it. Even though we own it.
Even though I own, I think the first 2 or 3. I think it's just the one, actually.
Just this one. That's the only one I could find.
Yeah. Maybe I'll watch it one day. I thought about it yesterday.
Yeah. We probably should have before seeing these.
Tom Hardy is the same character, right, as Mel Gibson?
You see,
it's a weird like reboot, sequel, like recasting thing.
I'm not too certain. For me, my personal interpretation is that Mad Max is just like the name of a persona. Yeah. For any character who kind of fits that.
Kind of like Batman.
Now, George Miller could, you know, have his own written like you know, memo that says, "Oh, this is that guy." But I don't know.
I don't know if they...
It makes more sense in universe if it's just kind of
It's like a collection
archetype.
of legends and myths.
More or less.
It's like King Arthur and the 12 knights, the Knights of the Round Table.
Which is why it makes more sense to get Furiosa, because she's a specific person.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Mad Max is just anybody who is a drifter or loner, in a way.
All right.
Potentially.
So Furiosa. How do you feel about it? Let's just jump into it. Good, bad?
There were parts that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
And there were parts that I did not enjoy.
Yeah.
And I am surprised at both of those. Because this movie is very character focused and very dialogue heavy. Yes. Which Fury Road is famously not either of those.
I think Tom Hardy says in the first hour he says a total of like 16 words.
I believe it. Yeah. Whereas
he was giving Arnold Schwarzenegger a run for his money.
Yeah. Whereas in this movie, any like Ryan Gosling in like, Blade Runner kind of levels of quiet. Whereas in this movie, I think 16 characters talk within the first, 16 minutes. Like much more character and dialogue than pure action compared to Fury Road. I went in expecting pure action. Yes. And certainly all the trailers kind of made it seem like it would be. I didn't see any reviews though. What surprised me the most though, that I enjoyed, was the structure of the movie. Because I didn't see that also explained anywhere else before, but that it was segmented into chapters. The first time we see, chapter 1, whatever the chapter was called, I was like, oh no. But then by the end of it, I was like, okay, I actually enjoy this. Like the fact that it's just snapshots of events, like almost skipping time in each one. I actually like that. And I think that works for the Mad Max universe, where you have so many different crazy parts of the world that you can just say, we're not going to explain why we have to be here. We're just going to cut to a time when we are here. I think that worked perfectly, in my opinion. And I liked that structure to the story. What I ended up not liking, to the extent, was the story itself. Yeah. I was being told. Now, Chris Hemsworth is a good action actor. We were discussing this on our way home from the movie.
We tried to decipher which brother was in each movie.
Chris Hemsworth is the better actor in action movies. Yeah. I think that we both agree with.
Yeah.
But his acting in this movie almost felt out of place in a weird way.
He was too Australian for the Australian movie, is what I maybe it's just because we're so used to hearing him have like a more like
American accent.
Not American, it's just more refined. And his, like the way he talks in a lot of movies, like Thor, right? Where it's not like, oh yeah, going down the Bobby, yeah. I was like, whoa, I've never heard of that. And I was even watching interviews with him and Anya Taylor-Joy, and like he lets it slip sometimes, where he like does like he like really like pushes that, and I'm like, oh man, we must be working really hard to not let that out.
I'm sure he only signed on because he got to be in Australia and do an Australian in this movie. But in a world full of characters where everything is cranked up to 11, somehow Chris Hemsworth managed to go too far. And I don't know if that was just what George Miller wanted and that was his directing, or if that was Hemsworth's Australianness. Something about that character was just too exaggerated in a way. The thing that I loved so much about Fury Road, that I think so many people loved, is that so much of the world building is ingrained into the characters without explanation. Who these people are, why they are the way they are, is never explained. You just have to accept it at face value. But now that we've seen that and we're going back into that world, why Chris Hemsworth's character is the way that he is, and why, those questions about why are you like this, he gets so much screen time and he has so much dialogue that you start expecting the moment where he's going to explain that to you. And he never does. And it just kind of makes his character seem shallow at the end of the film, in my opinion.
But I think that's fine for an action movie. Like, we're not discussing, Casablanca.
It's fine for an action movie, but this movie has a lot of characterization in it. There's a lot of dialogue between Furiosa. I mean, she doesn't have much dialogue actually, but his character is so incredibly prominent.
Anya Taylor-Joy.
I know, basically, his character is so prevalent that I almost started to expect that we would learn more about him. But despite how much we see him, we never do. In a way, he's a talker. He talks a lot.
Yeah,
and to it, that actually kind of started grating on me a little bit by the end of the film, where I was like, all right, you're gonna like say something new. You keep repeating the same like 5 themes here. You can say more. It really got to me at the end of it. So definitely his story as a villain, I just didn't buy it at all. Not that he wasn't villainous,
right,
but something about Chris Hemsworth's acting and that character's personality almost clashed with the realism.
I think he's just trying to be like the stereotypical, here's this wacky dude in the wacky wasteland.
Yeah.
And it's like, we already have a couple of those in Morton Joe, who's way more iconic.
And he takes himself seriously as a character.
Yeah.
Chris Hemsworth doesn't act serious about anything, basically.
I don't know how anybody followed him around. It's like, dude, like
why he had so many like people in this cult.
Yeah, it was funny.
What'd you think of so I like the structure of the story.
I thought it was just too long.
Yeah?
There was a moment where I was just like the entire opening chase where it's like you go to the camp, you go back, spoiler, character runs and then goes back to find another character. I'm like, this could have been an email. This could have been 15 minutes. It did not need to be the first 30 minutes of a 2.5-hour movie. Like, let's get it going. Like, if we're gonna do something like that, open with like a quick like flash cutting like montage of character being taken,
kidnapped. Yeah.
Spoiler because it's in Fury Road. And like, I don't know. It was just too much for me. And then it does a thing where it's like, oh, character goes 5 feet, turns around, comes back, and then like tries to save, doesn't save, this and that. And I was just like, no, let's go. Like this is too much.
I didn't like it at first because of course I didn't. But after watching the movie, I was like, it happened twice, but the third time, I trying to make sense of it using the rule of threes, I was like, okay, it happens at the beginning of the film, and then it happens at the bullet farm. But when does it happen the third time? And that's when I realized that that's the plot of Fury Road.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get that.
That's too much. You can't do
that.
It
is too much.
You can't do that over 2 movies.
It is too much. But if that's what he's going for, at least it's there.
I see if that's the case, kudos to trying it, George Miller, but you can't stretch it across 2 movies like that.
Yeah.
Especially when the third time that it happens is literally the final sequence of the Fury Road. When they're like, we got to go back to the Citadel.
Yeah.
I just thought it was too much. I thought
it absolutely is.
Just too much going back and forth. I get that there's only 3 places in the wasteland to go to. Right, I understand that. It's like Fallout. It's like playing Fallout 3, where it's like you have to go here, 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 and that's it. And it's like, okay, I get that. But it's also like, I don't need to see them driving. I don't need to see them opening the gate every time. I don't need stuff. It's just little stuff like that where it's like, this could have been a 2-hour movie. We could have cut out all the fat, and it would have just felt way more even paced.
So speaking to George Miller's direction, the first one, Fury Road.
Did you rewatch Fury Road scenes, by the way?
I did not rewatch it.
Did.
No. You did?
I stayed up till like 3 in the morning rewatching Fury Road scenes.
That movie is directed in a way that is, I wouldn't say very 2010s, but definitely that style of action of fast cutting, shaky camera. Now, that movie does it almost as best as any other film has ever done shaky cam, in my opinion. But Furiosa doesn't have that. And so we linger on these, and I don't know if George Miller wanted that to be, obviously it was his intention because he did it anyway. But I don't feel like it plays into the character as well, considering, like you said, there are so many of those moments that just play out when they could have just been in Fury Road. It was just like a snapshot. Mm-hmm. It was like you know, 2 seconds to show this, and then 2 seconds to show the next thing, and then 2 seconds to show the next thing. Whereas in this movie, it's like, we'll take 20 seconds to show the entire sequence. That's not to say that that is always bad to do in every film, because it's not. But
when it's
George Miller did it right the first time.
Yes, when it's a Mad Max movie.
Yeah, he did it perfectly the first time, and then say, "Oh, I'm never going to do it again."
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, maybe you just didn't have the resources in the editing room to,
there just felt like
he didn't get enough coverage.
There was something missing.
Energy.
Yeah.
Momentum,
I think so. Because the first movie, Fury Road, is like literally as soon as the credits go, it's like boom.
Yeah.
Like Max is kidnapped.
Mm-hmm.
Like and it doesn't stop until the end.
Yeah. Whereas in this movie, you're constantly starting and stopping. And so the amount of energy that is kept during those individual chapters, it's only supported because there's no energy in the directing, hardly any in the acting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the action scenes are few and far between. Mm-hmm. It's only supported by the characters and your interest in them. And because I wasn't interested,
because nobody likes, we didn't really like the characters.
Yeah. I was kind of at the end of it being like, what I liked about this movie was the amount of potential that it has. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, that's all it has, is the potential to have been a better film.
Do you think this movie's better with Charlize Theron in it?
No, I don't think so. I actually liked Anya Taylor-Joy. I think she did fine. Considering she plays a character who says like 4 lines, you know, in the course of the entire thing. Honestly, when it comes to length and scenes feeling drawn out, for me, the most egregious offender was the ending.
Yes.
That was almost too, like, it was almost like George Miller had, I think I've said George Martin at certain times here, and I'm sorry.
I mean, this applies to George Martin too.
Yeah. George Miller.
If you're listening, finish the goddamn book.
George Miller had multiple ideas about how it could end, and he shot every single one of them, and then he was like, oh, you know, I'll just throw all of them in. Because there's literally a moment where the narrator is like, and legend has it that it happened this way and this way and this way, and it's like, you just couldn't pick one.
Not even that, just how action sequences play out where she's chasing the big boss, right? Mm-hmm. Small spoiler. She's chasing the big boss, and then it's like, oh, now she has to go track down the 3 of them, and it's like, that's 10 minutes to not even get like a fulfilling ending. Yeah, it's kind of like, I just felt deflated. It just felt cheap to me.
Yeah, it's like, it's interesting because when it comes to action, you never want to have just a flat, like, always going.
Yeah.
You do want to have ups and downs, peaks and valleys. And this movie has individual scenes where that's the case. The first time, for example, that they take the war rig to Gastown, that whole sequence is pure Mad Max.
That's really good. That's a really good scene.
But that's the only time we get that. Yeah. Except for maybe the Bullet Farm battle.
I have problems with the Bullet Farm battle, but we'll get there.
You have problems with that one? Except for maybe that one, though. There's nothing else that comes close to how well structured the action in the first Fury Road was, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, or do you want to just spoil the whole film?
No. How do I say this? I'm trying to say this nicely.
Take your time.
I just think
be mean.
Another thing that I think just really fell flat was the visuals were just not good. Like the visual effects. Like it felt like they were in front of green screens a lot. And I know not all of Mad Max was actually filmed in the dunes of the Australian outback. I get it. I know you go to the green screen, but it never felt like that. Or that they at least like managed to intermingle the practical. Even though like 65% of the movie is practical.
Yeah.
Or the first one is practical.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I could very easily see which scenes were and weren't like real.
Mm-hmm.
Real. And it just took me out every time. I was
Really?
like, oh, it just hard cutting to, them sitting in a studio. And I'm like,
you see, I
this
felt
is Star Wars? What is
because
this?
to me,
I
part of
should
that.
have put that on Star Wars. Star Wars actually used practical sets.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say.
Avengers.
I didn't mind that so much because to me that kind of slapdash style is part of the energy of Mad Max movies. Even though the first movie had a lot of practical effects, the world is so chaotic and unhinged and comic booky that using certain shots where there is obvious green screen in use just adds to that comic booky nature to it, in my opinion. That's just how I felt. I didn't mind it as much. Obviously, I noticed it and I said, oh, they're in green screen.
Pardon this interruption as this podcast is brought to you by
Power
Raid
failures.
Shadow Legends.
Yeah, Raid Shadow Legends.
No, but
That's
what I
what
was
this movie
saying
was
is,
missing.
if I even remember where, I don't even think I saw where it died, but yeah, just an overall step down
Yeah.
in this movie.
Now, how much of that is because Fury Road is such a great movie?
Oh yeah, I mean it's comparing The Dark Knight to The Dark Knight Rises. Like when you're talking about one of the best movies of the decade, which I think Fury Road is, and then you're like 10 years later we're coming out with a sequel.
The expectations are high.
Yeah.
Or at least the pressure is on.
Yeah.
No, that's understandable.
But even with that thought, I mean, like, I would give this movie like a C.
Yeah.
I really, other than the couple of action sequences, I didn't really enjoy this movie.
I could see like a high C or low B for me potentially, just because I like the kookiness of the Mad Max world,
Yes.
and there is a lot of that in this movie. But I liked Anya Taylor-Joy as Furiosa, and I liked the story structure. I didn't mind that it was too long, or at least I didn't even really feel that way until the ending. But I didn't like Chris Hemsworth, and I think George Miller didn't live up to, I wouldn't say he didn't live up to, but I think that his approach and how he told and his directing in this film just didn't hit the kind of highs that Fury Road did. So I would say maybe low B.
How do you feel about the, so the Fury Road is very succinct, it's very concise, and it's not at all like, you don't feel like there are massive stakes in the world, right? Until the very, very end when they obviously kill the big boss.
Yeah.
Spoiler for Fury Road.
Spoiler for any movie.
Yeah, what are you doing on this podcast? We spoil movies all the time. But this movie, from the get-go, it's like, oh, these three warring nations are going at each other. And Furiosa is somehow like the puppet master, but also the puppet.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe we went a little too far.
I don't know. I didn't feel that way, personally. At least not about Furiosa's character. I definitely think that she, first off, she did it to herself. That's not a lie.
First on first take.
But
Furiosa, overrated?
no, she did what she could with the circumstances that she found herself in. But she also got off the bike and ran back. Yeah. So, I mean, there was an extent to which, and I didn't really see much of the trailers, but from what I remember, we don't really see Immortan Joe in the trailers and that world. So when we got there, really early on in the movie, I was like, are we supposed to be here?
I thought it was going to be like a cameo, right?
Yeah, I thought we were just going to be there for that one thing and then go back. But like, no, he's just a character in this movie who like has a plot critical role, which makes sense. But I didn't expect this movie to literally be like 5 minutes before Fury Road, you know? So there's an extent to which I feel like that kind of hampered the characterization we would get from Furiosa. Mm-hmm. Not just because Anya Taylor-Joy is younger than Charlize Theron. And so just looking at her, you think, oh, this is in the past. It's like, no, Mad Max is literally already in position, ready to go, you know? Like,
that's why it kind of took me out when they cut to the credits and it's Charlize Theron, very noticeably a Charlize Theron.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah. So
I was like, oh, we're just pretending like that's supposed to be the same character, even though we just spent 2.5 hours with that character.
I mean, what can you do? You know,
it's weird.
Batman Begins, Dark Knight. You know,
it was just weird. They could have done like a Looper thing where they make Joseph Gordon-Levitt look like Bruce Willis.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But it at least shows that that was Miller's plan to begin with.
Yeah.
Which is probably why he wanted Charlize Theron in anyway. But
shout out Warner Brothers for messing that up.
Regardless, any final thoughts?
No, I have nothing to say. Would you be interested in a sequel?
I don't think we'll get a sequel.
I don't think we're gonna get one.
I don't think we're gonna get a sequel.
Did you see how much money it made already?
Well, yeah, I think the box office bomb.
By how much money it made, I mean the lack of money it made. Yeah.
How much was it?
It was $71 million as of right now.
71 million
on a $168 million budget. So
it might be tough to get a sequel.
Yeah, especially when our favorite CEO over at Warner Brothers
he loves making money moves.
Just seems to be yeah.
I don't think we'll get a sequel. I'd be surprised if we did.
What about like a TV show?
I was thinking a TV show, but also what about a sequel not connected to George Miller?
I'm not interested.
You wouldn't be interested in it?
If it's not George Miller, I'm not interested.
I'm just saying.
We have been there before where a director that has nothing to do with a franchise has taken over said franchise and has completely butchered it so many times to the point, and it's funny, it says they're all 80s franchises. As soon as I hear like a project just doesn't have the original creators attached, I'm out.
What if he produces it?
That means nothing to me. Producing means nothing to me.
It means nothing. Yeah.
It's like James Cameron producing all the Alien movies and they're all crap.
Yeah.
Or
Ridley
Terminator
Scott.
movies, sorry. Yeah. Terminator movies.
No, that's understandable. I think a TV show might work, but I would be skeptical about the path it would take effects-wise.
Yeah.
Mad Max has been successful when it has relied on practical effects. This movie did not, and it has not to say that is a sole contributor to its unsuccess, because this was also just a bad weekend to release it in. But if you're going to do a TV show, that's going to require a sustained budget for effects.
Massive.
Practical effects will not be cheap. And visual effects, as Marvel is proving, can be done very cheaply, very quickly. So I would be extremely skeptical where it would come from. TV show might try to focus more on character too, and that was easily the weakest part of this film.
Yeah.
So
it's just not Mad Max.
It's just not Mad Max.
It's just not Mad Max. If you want a character-driven nuclear holocaust story, just watch The Last of Us.
The Last of Us? I thought you were going to say Fallout.
I Am Legend.
Yeah. Good movies.
Good movies. All right. Anything else?
No.
No? Cool. Thank you guys for tuning in as we finish my laundry in the background.
Sorry that our microphone died.
We'll see you guys next week. Hopefully next time we'll Fire that IT guy who doesn't know how to charge batteries. Okay, thank you. Bye.